Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kimberly Jackson. I'm Classroom Assessment and Learning Lead with the Department of Ed on loan from Chignecto Central. And I was just saying to one of the gentlemen that was in the room that when I wrote down, yes, I would do this session and what it would be about, we were sort of at one place in curriculum development, which I've been pretty heavily involved in, and looking at things from an assessment lens. And now, my head's still in the game, it's just kind of in a different place. So as I look through this, what this session was going to focus on, I've just kind of jotted down some key things. I'm aware of the time of the year and some things about people to think about, yes, maybe doing from now until the end of June, or for next year. And I'm also going to ask for some feedback on things. Simply because we're in building mode and supporting teachers, and there may be times when I flip over or Chris flips over to the whiteboard to get you to jot a few ideas down, and that gets saved with the presentation. So what I did is I put together some thoughts, things that we're certainly talking about with teachers, and I'm going to say P to 8 because we're currently working with 7 and 8. And I've been working with P to 3 teachers a lot over this year, and I know that we'll be doing some things and getting some focus areas for P to 6 again, and 7 and 8 is going to be piloting. And when I looked at the title, I did not change it, Assessment for Learning Primary to 6. This is actually assessment for learning for any grade. There's not really the things we might develop or we might have it as samples for students would be developmentally appropriate, but the principles are the principles are the principles, and that's what I'd like to focus on today. I'm just going to time out for a sec. Questions. Do you want to monitor if there are questions?
So I'll keep an eye on the chat box, so if you want to include questions in the chat box, you can. If you'd like to ask an audio question, in your upper left corner of your screen, you'll see a little hand button. And if you click that, you can raise your hand, which will give us an audio alert, and you can ask an audio question. Or you can simply type it in the chat box, and I'll try and interject as necessary.
Okay, perfect, perfect. All right, let's go to the next slide. So assessment for learning is really the umbrella, or one of the umbrellas, or part of the umbrella, maybe part of one of the spokes that comes out that affects all the work we do with our students. And I sort of, in thinking about this today, put in here, it is all about relationships. The relationships that we have with our students, that we have with our parents, that we have with our colleagues, that we have with our principals, that piece, that relationship piece is so important for assessment for learning. But it's not just about assessment for learning, right? So I know that I said, talking a bit about culturally responsive pedagogy. When we think about all about relationships, we think about students getting to know their teachers, teachers getting to know their students, being aware of the student's background, their family, their community. As we get to know them in September, we're looking at, so what have they got under their belt, where are they, and we're trying to figure that out as we engage them in reading workshop and writing workshop, again, at any grade level. I think it's a seamless relationship between classroom assessment and instruction. And if any of you have a good word that would smurge those two things, so that we weren't talking about classroom assessment on one side and instruction on another, you cannot do one without the other. And the deeper you read into the philosophy, pedagogy behind assessment for learning, the more that really becomes apparent. I guess my learnings this year from reading, and there was an assessment conference in Dartmouth earlier on in May, and it was the Canadian Assessment for Learning Network. And if you don't know anything about that network, I highly suggest that you check it out. And it's cafln.ca. And I don't think I added it at the end of the presentation, but I will, because it's a Canadian network. So teachers from across Canada, I think we had all but 2 provinces represented at the conference, and what they're doing in curriculum is what we're doing in curriculum. It was so inspiring and so affirming to listen to the types of things that different groups are doing, different teachers, different people who are supporting teachers. We're all on that same path, and I found that very, very exciting. Assessment for learning uses ongoing assessment to inform next steps in a student's learning. And so we talk about ongoing, and what does that mean? We talk about, I say, check-in points where, okay, we've kind of been focusing on a bit of this, and now we're going to sort of take stock of where are we at right now. And that doesn't necessarily, when I went to school, it was a test, right? It was a test that would determine that, and that's not necessarily the way things work now. We look at all kinds of ways that kids can demonstrate their learning. So there's a few things that are kind of, going around in the brain here. All of those practices, and I take you through the 5 principles of assessment for learning, are so supportive and almost interconnected with a culturally responsive classroom, because it is all about getting to know your learners, figuring out where they are, what their strengths are, and how to navigate them to the next step in their learning. And the reason I have such hope right now around this, because a lot of places, a lot of school boards or centers for education have talked about assessment for learning. We've done that in our province for quite a while, but we're not necessarily seeing it translated into practice in the classroom. And I feel that we now have a curriculum that we can do that with. So as P to 6, as 7 to 8, as 9 to 12 becomes implemented, so fine-tuned and implemented, I believe we have the opportunity now to do the right thing and to build those practices in that will support our students regardless of where they are. And I'm going to say support all of our students. It's for everyone that we want to see success. It's for everyone that we want to see progress and growth. And so that's kind of the big messages around this that I'm kind of gleaning as we're working. Social emotional learning is directly involved in that as well. So that respecting of the student, getting to know them, figuring out what triggers, what strengths, what areas for growth. It just seems to all come, and that's why I've got the umbrella up there, because that was the best analogy that I could use. And in the assessment for learning literature, you will see things that talk about a classroom environment, that talk about tuning to student strengths, that talk about helping them understand what type of learner they are and how they best can demonstrate, and being open and able to do that in a way that is common sense for the student, and I also believe common sense for the teacher. And I think as we develop more materials to support this within our curriculum and across our grades, I think that parents will become engaged as well, and will have an opportunity maybe to really look at what their child is doing and see those strengths and see those next steps in learning as well. So it's a really a good communication tool. And a couple of the folks from British Columbia shared with us at this conference different ways they've used technology to showcase and I guess communicate student learning with parents. And so I think we're going to have a few really interesting ideas for people that want to travel with us down that road. What can this look like in P6? I probably should have taken that out because I think it's what it can look like in any classroom, to be honest with you. I don't think it's in one place or another. I think what we do with students in primary in building their skills and their concept knowledge and how they can demonstrate, some of those same things can be translated in at grade 10 or 11 or 12. They're pretty universal. It's the materials you're using and the focus of instruction that sort of uh, pushes you into whether it's a grade 1 classroom or a grade 10 classroom. So the next one. Gradual release of responsibility has been in every guide since 1995 or 1996. And it is critical for our learners at any age. And what I've learned is assume nothing. And the most important piece is the first part, which is about modeling. Modeling expectations, modeling how we do things, modeling for those students so that they build that understanding. Last week, when we had our grade 7 to 8 pilot schools in, I think that hit me more, that that modeling can happen at any grade level and we should assume nothing. And as we go down the road of really focusing on competencies and skills, it will be important for all of us to have that ability to model, because students won't necessarily be arriving in the classrooms in those upper grades with all of those skills intact or experience with that. And so this modeling is going to be important for all of us. We have to be intentional. And I'm just going to flip to a little video clip. So I pulled out two things from our DVL site today and just did a couple of little clips on them, just because I think we need to go back into what we already have as supports and resources and look at what do we need next. So this is from P3 reading assessment, but we talk about triangulation when we talk about classroom assessment. We talk about conversations, observations, and products. And we've talked about that across grade levels P to 12. And this is just a clip of a couple of teachers. I'm showing you the opening of the video clip because I think, for me, it was just really right. You know, this video was done in 2012, but there are many pieces of that whole series that are still very applicable. So Chris is just going to click play. It doesn't just happen. I really like that opening because I feel that it supports where we want to go, and I believe where we need to go. And again, I believe that we assume nothing, and that we have to be very intentional about the type of planning, the type of instruction, the type of ongoing assessment. All of those pieces need to align, and that alignment is the shift that I am seeing as we go further down the curriculum streamlining renewal pathway. All right, we're going to, so that's, oh, sorry, that's just a quick clip of the gradual release of responsibility model. And so it starts out with the modeling, then it moves to guided practice where you're doing it together. That's how I've always sort of looked at that. That then you start to have them do more, and we used to call that more of almost becoming independent, but you're sort of backing away, the teacher backs away so that the student could do can do that on their own. And our role as teachers in that work is so critical, to know when to come in and out and to know when they're ready to do it on their own, because to do it on their own is how we're going to know how well they're achieving. And that's an important piece. So the gradual release of responsibility model, we've often talked about it just in relation to instruction. I believe it's also in relation to gathering that evidence of learning, and tying those two things together is an important piece. So what I'd like to do, or what I plan to do, is to just go through the 5 principles of assessment for learning. We've been using this pretty consistently in the work that we've been doing with curriculum, also in the work that we're doing around report cards, and also in the work that we're doing around the assessment policy. So this all does connect together, and that word alignment is very, very important, not just for you as the teachers of the curriculum and working with the students, but I think for all of us and for parents too, to see that progression and how that goes together. Just before I flip into the first one, I will say this to you, because I will be looking for a bit of feedback. I'm kind of thinking that I might take those 5 principles and do a webinar or some kind of a voiceover PowerPoint or something that on each one, because I think they each deserve attention, and they each have some strategies that you can use for instruction and a classroom assessment. And so I'm thinking that it would be good to pull those together, and then there'd be a series, so to speak. And so if you're very comfortable in providing feedback, then you may not need to see that one on it. You may want to focus on something else. I think that gives people a bit of choice, but also, you know, for a new teacher, and I'm thinking of that differentiation now of all of our colleagues, they may want to sit and go through all 5. So just get some feedback from you before the end of the session. We might pop the whiteboard up at the end, and you can certainly type on that or draw on that. All right, clarifying and sharing learning intentions and criteria for success. One of the most important, I believe, because students need to know what they're learning, and it shouldn't matter what grade, what classroom you go into. The students should know what the focus of that day is, and they should be able to explain and describe the quality of their learning. So they should be able to know what they're doing, and I don't know if why they're doing it is the right question, but what they're doing, and be able to say, and this is how I'm doing in relation to that. And they need to know how they can demonstrate what they know. We have such a diverse group of students in our classrooms, and all with their own needs, and we need to be able to figure out what the best way to demonstrate that is, because in the end, we believe all children can learn, and we believe that we can affect the progress, growth, and achievement of our students. And so this piece becomes really important. There are parts, and I'm going to speak to our streamlined P6 right now, there are parts of that curriculum and all curricula that are very clear, and you can easily pull out what that criteria would be or what those learning intentions are. There are other components that maybe are scaffolded within. And so what we'd like to do is tackle the ones that are kind of buried or need scaffolding, and help work with teachers to help do that. With all of this whole piece around classroom assessment, we will be working with teachers to bring samples and suggestions, not just in a separate assessment tool, but how do you do this together? How do you have instruction and classroom assessment? How do you gather that evidence of learning, and how do the students do that? But they first need to know what the learning intentions are, and they need to have that criteria for success. some centers of education have uh, writing continuums and reading continuums and all kinds of pieces, and we're going to pull that all together with our streamline and come out with something that is good for all of us across the province. And so hopefully some of you might even like to be part of that, and because we're going to be looking for, you know, people who are in the classroom practicing this and making it happen for kids. We need to build on all of our successes that are out there right now. I love the first word of this one, and every time I read it, I know I say the same thing. So those of you who've heard me before, or I've had the pleasure to talk with, would probably have heard me say this. I love the word engineering, because I do believe that. I believe we have to be intentional, and we have to design whatever it is, a discussion, the questions, the learning tasks, the, you know, the how kids are going to process. We have to be strategic about that. We don't have that, I say that, time to waste. And to get kids in and engaged, and it has to make sense to them. And whether it's a mini lesson, whether it's students practicing what you've already taught through a mini lesson, whether it's small group instruction, if they have that clear focus, the better off they're going to be because they're engaged, and the better off you'll be to be able to do the kinds of things that you need to do. Open-ended questions, an inquiry focus, or inquiry-based units, or studies, project-based. You've probably heard all of these kinds of things being talked about. And anything that opens up the learning and has them exploring is what our, well, it's being shown what our students really need. And so this part is, again, that connection that I feel, if we hold these principles, that we can start building those types of things with, for you, for the teachers, and for the students as well. This is an important one. Feedback, feedback, feedback. Years ago, I was at a conference with Ann Davies, and she talked about giving students dollops of feedback, D-O-L-L-O-P-S, I believe. And whenever I say it or hear it, I think of two things, either sour cream or whipped cream. Because, you know, dollop on top of the piece of pie, right? And I don't think I've appreciated it as much as I have in the last 2 years. That what I've learned about what feedback can do for individual students and why they need that, and why we need to be really specific with it. It has to be in relation to that first principle around what are the learning intentions, what's the criteria, what is our area of focus, and they need to know what that looks like. That's where they start taking on that responsibility, right, for their own learning, and you're working with them to talk about what are the goals for the next step in their learning. What are those small, manageable chunks that they can keep working on? And it can be challenging, but I also feel it can be really rewarding. And I'm going to show you a very quick clip of Kim Bain, who is a teacher in Chignecto, or she was anyway when I knew her, and she's doing something around the feedback that I'd like to highlight this piece.
Later, conversations can be more focused, drop-in or scheduled conferences during which teachers
Julius, this morning we're going to do an assessment. So it's a chance for you to show everything you know. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and I just want you to answer them with what you know. Okay?
And what did you do when you came to that word?
Debbie Miller, teaching with intention. You really have to think about it and plan it. And
what did you do?
And it doesn't just happen.
So today, now that your books are just right for you, you can start practicing those strategies, right? Today, what I want you to do, I notice that sometimes you're just stopping at the first letter of the words. So for example, There's the word grinned. Sometimes you stop at the GR, gr. I want you to read all through the word and look at the sounds at the end of the word, because there's some little words in there, right? IN, and the D sound on the end. So instead of stopping at the front of the word, I want you to move through the whole word. Look at the back, the front, and the middle. Okay? Can you do that for me today? Good job. Okay. Fill out your school book too when you're done. Thanks, Carter.
Sorry about that. It looks like the two videos kind of overlapped, but I think you heard towards the end Kim talking about what that student would move on, next on, and what their goal would be. And I don't know if you could hear it, but they had a little goal book, and so they were keeping track of their goals and they're setting the goals for the next step in learning. I've seen that done on almost like a portfolio online as well, that could be shared with parents. And so that's kind of something I think we're going to delve into, how we can use our technology to support what we're doing without making it too much for students and also too much for teachers, like trying to keep this really reasonable. But this part about feedback, I just cannot stress the power that I think is in here that we have yet to really explore, and what that can mean for students and what that can mean for gathering that evidence of learning. So that will be an interesting, one-off session to look at and do. This is probably the most, and I'm going to speak from myself now. Probably one of the things that I did not do as much as I could have with. I think that as we're focusing on developing 21st century skills with students, as we're focusing on ensuring that they're developing those competencies, that we really want to have students take sort of control of their own learning as much as we can. And I think that that's something within the new curriculum that we're looking at, and looking at competencies and skills, that we're actually going to be able to have some mechanisms to do that. Explicit instruction to teach students ways to monitor their own learning is critical. But I think we need to work on what can that look like. And I think the skills progression is going to help us. I think as we look at developing some rubrics that tie these things together, that will help. E-portfolios or portfolios, whether they're web-based or on paper really, are other ways. So it all ties back into how we develop those relationships with the students, how we get to know them, what their strengths are and their areas for improvement, and then how can we help them learn to monitor their own. And there, again, are lots of samples of different provinces that are going down the same road as we are with this work, and maybe elevating it a bit more, sorry. And I say that because really it was in the action plan that was developed a few years ago, where a refocus on assessment for learning was listed. And what we're really going to do is to take that and really make that happen by embedding it in the curriculum, but also by building some powerful pieces from these principles. Oh, what happened here? Sorry, there looks like an overlap there too. Activating students as instructional resources for each other is an area that I'd like to delve deeper into. I think we've always had kids, if somebody was doing a presentation, the students would maybe give a rating, or they might edit or co-edit a piece of writing. I think there are people who have expanded upon that, and there are others who have stayed sort of in that mode. Having them as instructional resources for each other is, in this literature, a little bit different and a little bit bigger than that. And so this area, I think, is going to be fun to dig down into. I think we can do that from P to 6. I also think that there might be more uptake as the students get older, and so we'll have to look at that and see that, and how we can make that as an important piece, because that's another source of feedback in that whole feedback loop that Ann Davies talks about, is having the peer feedback form. And I think that's going to be really important. So if you're interested in that, you need to let me know about that one too. So I've kind of said, I think that instruction and classroom assessment are inseparable, and if we could find a different way to say that, I would love to be able to find that. As we teach, we gather evidence of student learning. As we observe, we gather evidence of student learning. And as we talk to students, we gather evidence of student learning. And all of that informs what we're teaching. And for me, it's almost like a cycle. It just goes around and around and around. And the next slide's going to talk about that too, because this is the other thing. I'm watching my time here, so we have time for questions. The other area that I feel is sort of bubbling to the surface is around planning. And if any of you were involved in P to 3, we did try to put together yearly plans to help with the new curriculum. And really, and because I was part of it, I can be honest and say it really didn't go the way we thought it would. And it's just where we were at the time. And I think we have some opportunities here to really help people and to be intentional and strategic. Planning classroom assessment is as critical as planning a lesson. If you can't do one without the other, you plan them together. And that way, that helps you with what that ongoing evidence that we talk about, what you're gathering, how you're gathering. If that's planned along the way, then when you sort of stop to do that little check-in, you've got the evidence in order to do that. And there's that cyclic piece again. We determine, we plan, we gather the evidence, then we determine where they are, and so it goes and so it goes. And it does make our role as teachers different in that we are, and you may have noticed in the video with Kim, she had a clipboard. I know teachers who are using an iPad or other kinds of devices to gather that evidence of student learning as they go, and then use that to inform where the students need to go next and have the students part of that. So this piece I'm actually quite excited to dig into, because it's kind of the stuff that I feel if we can show how those go together and it makes sense for people. Doesn't mean we would plan everything out for the whole curriculum, no. But we could do some models and work with you, teachers who are keen and interested in this, to develop and to have those pieces together so that people can see what it might look like. You always have to leave that flexibility and that professional judgment. I know sometimes people don't like the term professional judgment, but we're in a business where we have a variety of different folks coming to our classrooms, and we have to make judgments and decisions about what that assessment needs to be, what that next lesson needs to be. And I'd never want to see us hinder that, but at the same time, I want us to try and support that. So it's that, sometimes I'm doing that hands up, hands down thing. So next steps, and this is probably as much for next year as it might be for, we're almost at the end of May. So I would say if you're interested in these principles, look to what you're already doing and start small with one piece at a time. Maybe it's feedback. You just want to improve the quality of the feedback that you're giving students. Maybe it's planning more around classroom assessment as you move on to the end of the year. There's all kinds of sort of next steps with this work that can happen. I suggest you look at some of the EECD videos or the webinars. There's been some webinars done in the last couple of years around classroom assessment. I think there's one on reporting as well. And you can look forward to some more. We're really talking about getting out into classrooms and talking with teachers so that you've got that voice and that view. But we do have several, well, quite a number actually, of videos that are on, I say the DVL site, I don't know if that's the proper term, but I put the link, I think, on the last page for you. Because there's things on writing, there's things on reading, there's all kinds of different pieces, and they are done with classroom teachers and often in their classroom as they're doing and then discussing it. So there's some really good places I think we can go in. We've started doing that to see where the gaps are and what do we need to develop more of. I forgot one author here, but I just threw down a few names. Susan Brookhart is, I call her an easy read. She's an easy read. You want to put it in? Yep. Damien Cooper. So, D-A-M-I-A. Yeah. Susan Brookhart is a good read. She's very practical. So I find that there are things that you can take and adapt. Ann Davies, of course, is Canadian and has, I think my friend calls them the jelly bean books, and they have some really good things around feedback, around, I'm going to go blank. Anyway, there's a series of 3 that are really good. And Dylan Willem is currently my favorite. So he is British. He's in the States. He has a company that puts out loads of stuff. And he was one of the writers of Inside the Black Box. So the work that actually moved assessment for learning ahead. And his embedded formative assessment is a great resource and a great read. I am thinking that many of these are on the ALR already, but we can do a check, and that might be a good thing to put up on your Moodle to let you know that. Damien Cooper is also Canadian, and Damien has good strategies that are applicable at any grade level, and he's got a nice way about him in when you're reading him and when you see him in person. And my last piece is just that DVL site. One thing is to go in and take a look and see what's there and browse through it. And if you notice gaps, please, get the information to us or to me as we're entering the phase of development now to have some things ready for the fall. So the more, the merrier. I'm going to stop talking and you are welcome to ask any question. If you want to do that with your voice or you want to type it, I'm perfectly happy. I feel like I went really quick because it's a huge topic, but I just wanted to highlight some of the key things that we are currently in and will continue to be doing. We could put the whiteboard up too, maybe.
Yep, the whiteboard is here now, and if you'd like to type in the whiteboard, you can use the tools at the bottom of your window. There's a capital T for the text editing tool, and you can type right on the whiteboard. Your name will be attached. Or you can add questions and comments into the chat box. So we're getting a couple questions typed in here. We'll just wait for them to be completed, and then I'll read them back. So Jerry asks, are you able to share the presentation with us?
It's being recorded, so you will have access to it. It will be in, is it an archive?
There'll be an archive for the NS Ed talk series through the DVL and also through the links that were provided for Peter Oldreed. What about your PowerPoint slides?
Sure, we can do that. I'll just fix those couple of things on them. I don't mind that at all.
I can make them public for people to download right now.
Let's fix a couple. Yeah, let's fix a couple of the slides and then.
Okay.
Yes, so see that I would, Jillian saying I would be interested in further information on feedback. I think that is a powerful place for us to go. What I'll do, Jillian, is maybe add to the slide deck at the end a couple of things that I found to be helpful or useful, and then if anybody else has something, you know, add to that, that would be wonderful.
And Peter Oldreeve has everyone's email from the registration sheet, so maybe we can send this all out via email that way.
Right. Oh, thanks, Cheryl. That's a great one too. The hinge that joins teaching and learning. Yeah. As you're writing, I'll just share a personal story. I always say my vested interest in education, because I'm in my 31st year, is that I have a granddaughter in school, and she's in grade 1. And somebody gave me a book yesterday, and Cheryl will probably have a chuckle about this, I'm sure. It's called Feedback, and it's a story about, it's for it's for little ones. So she and I read that last night. So she said to me this morning, so Nana, feedback, like that's pretty important, isn't it? And I thought, oh, I should have videotaped her having this conversation, because she was very thoughtful about it. And so I can give feedback to friends, and yes, and you can give feedback to friends, and it's just a lovely book. I'll find the information on the author, because you may want to use that in your classroom. If I was teaching right now, that's exactly what I would do. Yeah, Cheryl, I think it's at home on my dining room table, so I'll pop that into the slide so you know, because it's really good. It's really good.
One of the things that we do with these online video conferences is wait an inordinately long, large amounts of time to make sure that there's no other questions coming in with time delays. So we'll wait another moment just to make sure that everyone's satisfied before we wrap things up.
And my email is kimberly.jackson@novascotia.ca, and you're more than welcome to email me if you've got a question and you're looking for some other resources, whatever. I'm happy to do that. This is a passion of mine and has been for quite a while, and I sort of feel that now we're actually going to have a chance to do a really good job with this, and really support you as teachers, and support our students, all of our students, in their learning.
There's no other questions. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, folks. And 45 minutes just kind of went boom. All right, thanks.